Okay, stop. Say what you want.
Why? Is a man?
Golden have no vision for the people. That's the vision. No vision, you know. So no, now go with it. For them and lead on up there with. I'm still excited, no vision. It's a golden net one. He not go win. Neither mountain. I'm gonna go take the come back, you know.
It's on fire. Clarkstone, man. Clarkstone is
No.
Well, there you have it. This was said when? 2 years ago? Maybe a year ago? And what has changed? What has changed? No vision for the people. But does that mean he doesn't have a vision? Now that is the $1 million question. So, it means there is a mystery to solve. Yes, and you know that we at Jamaica 411, we just love mysteries, don't we? Yes, man. So we are going to do a little exploring, throw out our fishing line, and see if we catch a fish or two. What do you say to that? Agree? Great. But before we go on, let me welcome you to Jamaica 411. Thank you so much, everyone, for stopping by, keeping me company as usual. If you're here with me for the first time, welcome, welcome. Do remember to subscribe, give the video a thumbs up, share, and feel free to leave your comments in the comment section, okay? Great. To my subscribers and my many viewers, welcome back. Always nice to have you. Yes, I do appreciate your company greatly. Especially when you leave your comments in the comment section. Yes, man. Some of you brightest, man, Lord of mercy, me can't keep up with you now. No, sir. Anyway, you all know the ropes. You're going to give the video a thumbs up from now on because, you know, when we get down to business, you know, you're not going to want me to be asking you to do any such thing. So please go ahead, give the video a thumbs up. Remember now to share. Need to get this message out because this message, boy, every time I tell you something, I tell you the message is important. It's almost as if each one video I upload is as if the message is more important than the last. But guess what? They are all important messages, and this one needs to get out because this now is bread and butter. And you know, we Jamaican people, we love food, bread and butter, not true? So please share. And then return and join me. And then, of course, you know, I thank you in advance. Yes, ma'am, I'm very grateful. Good. All right, so now you're back with me. Let us now get down to business. So, what earth-shattering thing do I have to say to you today? Well, I don't know if it's earth-shattering, but it is something that I buck up as I'm, you know, occasionally buck up things, looking for one thing and found something else. Well, that is the case with this one. So you must be saying to yourself, what is now? Well, when I was doing my previous video, I was trying to find out whether or not, you know, Bruce Golding had instituted the biggest tax ever. Yes, at that time, I found out, yes, it was the biggest tax ever. And then the PNP in 2013 had to institute a bigger tax even. But in searching for the information, I came upon this gem. You see what it says? The heading says, Matalon says tax package is necessary. This is a JIS story, and it was published December 19, 2009. So, you know, it was a Labour Party that was in power at the time. So, let me make you see now what it is this gem is. I'm telling you now, this is a gem I know me now there now, me peeps. Lot of massy. So it reads the full story. President of the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica, Joseph M. Matalon, sees the government's latest tax package as necessary in light of the impact of the global economic crisis on Jamaica. In an interview with JIS News Friday, that's December, Mr. Matalon, while describing the tax package as very significant, mean to say it high, and perhaps one of the largest in the history of the Jamaican economy, it was, cited its necessity under the current circumstances. And they're quoting him now. These are, in fact, tough times, and tough measures are required in tough times, he said. Mr. Matalon, who is also chairman of the ICD Group, chaired the Tax Policy Review Committee appointed by former Minister of Finance and Planning, Dr. Omar Davies. Pay close attention, folks. It's coming, it's coming, it's coming. Let me read that for you again. Mr. Matalon, who is also chairman of the ICD Group, chaired the Tax Policy Review Committee, which was appointed by who? Dr. Omar Davies when he was the Minister of Finance. All right. Now, what it is that Tax Policy Review does, we shall soon find out. Let me continue. It says, which examined each of the main sources of tax revenue and their impact on the economy and handed in a report to government in November of 2004. So what did they do? Omar wanted, this is after the financial collapse. People were complaining about the taxes. They were charging a whole heap of tax, because they had the government workers to pay, among other things. And people were calling for the streamlining of the tax, make it more efficient. So Omar said, okay, no problem. I am going to set up a committee and you guys look at it. Basically, what they expect is all the people of the industry will come together, is a kind of think tank, and make proposals, right? So they would look at each one of the tax. So what are the taxes now? You have the PAYE, you have the consumption taxes. Outside of PAYE, which is direct taxation, you have all the other taxes are consumption taxes. So you have GCT, you have excise duty, which is a charge on liquor. You have customs duty. You have stamp duty. You have transfer tax if you're transferring property. You have all sorts of different taxes. You have special consumption tax and a variety of duties, tax that they charge on goods coming into the country, right? So they wanted to do a comprehensive review of the tax system and set up a committee to look at the tax system. They did. They look at each one of the line item of tax in the budget and make proposals concerning them. And what was the objective? They needed to, the government it is, when I say they, the government needed to know how much impact did each of these tax revenue had on the economy. That's basically what that was about. And so this committee, which was chaired by Joseph Matalon, we call him Little Joe Matalon. You probably wonder why. That's because at the time when we knew him, way back in the 80s, 90s, there was another Joe Matalon. I believe it was his uncle that was very much alive. So to distinguish between them, we called one Little Joe Matalon. So he was the young one, we call him Little Joe. And then the other one now would have been Joseph Matalon. You follow? Good. That's why he has an M between his name. So so we know that it's, the difference between himself and his uncle. Anyhow, so Little Joe Matalon was the one who chaired this committee. Let me continue now. Oh, and before I move on, and the report is saying that they did do the examination and they completed a report and handed the report to the government in November of 2004. So at that time, it's 2004. PNP was in power. By 2007, the government changed hands. And this was 2009 they were talking about. Good. So they just gave us a little background. Wonderful. Let's continue now. So the GIS went on to report that committee. also comprised 12 professionals from the private and public sector and the trade unions, including Dr. Wesley Hughes, accountants Ethelyn Norton Cook, Elizabeth Jones Carr, Eric Crawford, Alison Peart, and Wilfred Bagaloo, attorney at law. Who that? Uno seen right? Yes, man. Mark Golding. He was on Omar Davis's Tax Policy Review Committee in 2004. Yes. And of course, trade unionist Lloyd Goodley. Now, we're going to read on to hear what else Joe Matalon had to tell us. All right? So it says here, Mr. Matalon said that while there is no question that their recommendations will impose a burden on the Jamaica people, he believes, particularly in the context of the fiscal constraints facing the government, that the measures are necessary. What is he telling us? He is basically telling us that when they submitted that report to Omar, right, because their recommendations would have imposed a burden on the people, Omar never implemented it. But poor Bruce found himself in a tight spot. So he was going to make the attempt to implement the recommendations of this tax committee that the Englishman was sitting on with other people. All right. You get that too? Great. Now let's see what else we can glean from Mas Joe, if anything. So Mas Joe went on to say, I believe that there is recognition among the private sector membership, including our PSOJ association membership. And remember, so white people in that. Yes, based on what we saw, couldn't be anything else. Except for every now and then a token black person you might see. But let me continue. So he's saying that tough measures were required. They recognized that tough measures were required. And I think it was anticipated that in addition to those initiatives already announced that are designed to compress the level of public expenditure, there was going to be the need to raise significant additional revenue, he explained. The PSOJ president pointed out that measures such as the increase in the GCT rate and the widening of the tax base via the removal of exemptions reflected the organization's position and were recommended in their 2004 report. Let me read that for you again, my peeps. Joe Matalon, who is the president at that time, was the president of the PSOJ, that white man's club, pointed out that the measures such as the increase in the GCT rate and the widening of the tax base via the removal of exemptions, remember there were lots of stuff that were exempted. And you recall why they were exempted by the PNP government, right? And what type of goods were exempted. The goods that were exempted were those that the poor people mostly spend their money on. Sardine, toilet paper, bully beef, all sorts of things, mackerel, bread, flour, anything with flour base in it, anything at all that they recognize from studying that the poor people tend to spend their money on when they're shopping, like in wholesale or anything like that, they were tax exempt. It was designed to remove the burden of the GCT from that man and put it on others who were better off than him. Right? So, when Joe Matalon said that Bruce found himself in a tight spot because of the world economic situation that was going on outside of Jamaica, right? They increased the GCT, if I remember right, from 15 to 17.5%. And the widening of the base, the tax base, via the removal of exemptions, reflected, listen to what I'm saying now, it reflected the organization's position, meaning to say, that is our position as private sector members and the PSOJ members. That is our position. And that was what was recommended in the 2004 report, meaning to say all 12 members and him were in total agreement with this arrangement. Are you understanding me, my peep? Including the Englishman. It was a unanimous decision because it was in the report. And if they did not like that, anybody on that committee who was in disagreement, they would have resigned and come off it. So they were all in agreement. Increase the GCT. That was what they told Omar to do. And all them sitting there where you have exemption upon, but you have exemption upon sardine and bully beef and bread and bulla and toilet paper and feminine napkin and milk and sugar and rice. Take them off. Take them all off. And you heard what Matalon said, that they were aware that it would have caused hardship on the Jamaican people. Which Jamaican people I'm talking about? Certainly not the 1% and the middle class, because the middle class can make the adjustments. The middle class don't spend the majority of the money on food, and the poor people do. 50 to 60%. 50 to 60% up to that time of the 5,500 that the people were getting in minimum wage was being spent on food and transportation. So that when you remove the base and you add 17.5%, and that you are adding $937 that would have come out of the people and pay every week when they spend their 5,500 pay, which means that is inflationary. GCT is an inflationary tax, and it's a burden that continues every year. It don't stop. Is that a one-off tax? And Mark Golding was sitting on that committee. No. Remember now, this was 2004. That policy finally came into being in 2009 because the government was in really bad position and they had to pay the debt. Now, my recollection is that the government, Bruce Golding government, did not take off all the items from the exemption. There were still some items that were exempted, right? But they did remove some items in order to get more revenue. That's the key. They needed money. But let us read on and see what else he had to say, which may be of interest to us. All right. So, GIS is reporting. He was disappointed. This is Joe now. He was disappointed that there was not a more aggressive widening of the tax base. However, they're quoting him now, we believe that the government may find that there are diminishing returns in terms of revenue performance from increases in the rate of GCT, and that it would have been much more efficient from an economic standpoint to have even further widened the base and use the additional revenue generated to actually reduce the rate of GCT, he contended. So what is he saying? He disagreed with the increase in the GCT. What he said is that what they should have done is just take off the exemption of all of the basic food item and the basic needs items, take the GCT off them and keep the rate at what it was before, which I do believe must have been 15%. So he was disappointed that the government chose instead to raise the GCT and keep a lot of the items that poor people use on the exemption list. Anyway, let's hear what else he has to say. This is interesting, because he was speaking on behalf of the members of that tax committee, as well as his members of the Private Sector Organization of Jamaica. All right, let's continue. He said that one of the PSOJ's main disappointments with the announcements was the fairly narrow range of taxes targeted. See? Rather than a more comprehensive approach to incorporate various other tax inputs and regimes such as corporate and personal income tax and property tax. The property tax is a tax that has underperformed for many years. The level of compliance has been very low, something in the order of about 40%, I believe. So we would have liked to have seen measures designed to address the performance of property tax, he said. Mr. Matalon alluded to the impending increase in the personal income tax threshold to just over $440,000, effective January 1, 2010, pointing to its consistency with the PSOJ's recommendation for a very significant increase in this area. You hear that? So, there's going to be an adjustment in the threshold. What does that mean? It means that the government will be losing revenue. When the government is losing revenue, the government must get the revenue back from somewhere else if it does not have additional cash. So, what was Bruce doing? According to Mr. Matalon's plan, he and his committee and his PSOJ members, they were intending to increase the threshold, which will benefit all of the workers who work above income above that, and then put the burden of that taxation on those persons who were buying basic food items. Mr. Matalon wanted the threshold to increase more aggressively and the GCT exemptions to be taken off all of the items that were exempted. So that would be, in effect, a transfer of the burden of the taxation from those who are working and who can afford it to those now who the law sought to protect in the first place, the poor man, right? And that was what Bruce did. Soften it up a bit. Never want to kill the people them too much. He needed the money, so he gave them what they wanted, right? Increase the threshold, just necessary, and remove the exemption on some of the basic items that poor people used. Only some. So he need to get the other shortfall from somewhere else. And what did he do? He raised the GCT by 2.5%, if my memory serves me right. Right? It's a little dancing thing because he is the one. He's the one that the people vote for. Right? Not the people in the private sector. So he has a responsibility to make sure that he does a dancing thing that does not put as much pressure on the poor as it was that the PSOJ and its membership envisioned. See my point? Let us continue reading. And we're not done with Mr. Matalon yet about this very significant increase in the threshold that he wanted. We're not finished with him yet. But he has more to say, so let's hear him out. Mr. Matalon went on to say, we had also recommended as a part of the Tax Reform Committee's report that the threshold be subsequently indexed either to inflation or to the exchange rate in order to maintain its value over time. But that has not been done, he pointed out. Other recommendations Mr. Matalon contended should be considered include unification of the tax structure, simplifying it in the process, and a more comprehensive reform of the tax regime across all of the various tax types. Whatever that means, hopefully he will explain it shortly. Anyway, let me go on. Mr. Matalon pointed out that a fair amount of the representation has been made to the administration on the concerns resonating through the National Planning Summit and the series of expert teams that were formed under the summit, which report to a monitoring board chaired by industry, Investment and Commerce Minister, the Honorable Carl Samuda. So let me see if me understand this now. He said a fair amount of representation has been made to the administration, that's Bruce Golding, on the concerns resonating through the National Planning Summit. So it seems as if Bruce Golding set up a National Planning Summit. They had a team of experts formed under the summit, and it says here they report to a monitoring board, and that board was chaired now by Carl Samuda. So you have Carl Samuda, the monitoring board, the team of experts, and then the National Planning Summit with people like Matalon and others in it, I imagine. So Bruce set that up to see if he can figure out how we can get a national consensus, I suppose, on the way forward. That's my guess. Anyway, let me continue. He added that the PSOJ recently, in a document entitled The PSOJ's Economic Policy Framework, outlined policy prescriptions that the organization felt could produce strong, sustained growth in the Jamaican economy. According to him, we are in the process now of consulting with our sister associations, including the Jamaica Manufacturers Association, Jamaica Exporters Association, Jamaica Chamber of Commerce, and a number of other associations, maybe 25 or 30 in all, to try and arrive at a consensus in relation to that policy framework. That is what they are proposing. Now, you remember in my previous video when I talk about the treason of the PSOJ and that it is them thinking that they know more about this thing than the people who we elect, right? That put pressure on the Bruce Golding government that ended up costing this country. Well, I had it as 4.5% decline in the production of the country. The gross domestic product declined by 4.5. Elsewhere, I see it reported as 5.1% during that same period. Even in times when other economies started growing in 2010, we were still declining because Bruce Golding and Audley Shaw, like PJ before them, took the wrong people's advice. But let me not get ahead of myself. Let him complete his thoughts thoroughly, and then we will get into our views on what he said. He went on to say that will become the platform for our advocacy with the government. That him get consensus with the other groups, 25 to 30 groups, right? That will become the platform for our advocacy with the government in terms of implementation of those economic policies which we believe can generate sustained rates of strong economic growth, Mr. Matalon contended. Now, you see what I mean when I tell you, say, my peeps, that they were putting pressure on the Bruce Golding government to implement for them ideas? And who elect them? Who elected them? But give them a chance. Let them say them peace. Let them say them peace. Be patient. Be patient. So let us continue. Meanwhile, President of the Small Business Association of Jamaica, Dalma James, told JIS News that against the background of the announcement, the organization was in the process of establishing a one-stop shop to help their members with their tax matters. While not providing details, Mr. James explained that the association will have to strengthen its management information department to help members to better manage their cash flow and day-to-day operations. And they're quoting him, "We already have some systems in place which are working to enable them to bulk buy and through these mechanisms save on normal operating costs," he explained. So here it is that the Small Business Association of Jamaica, what is he, president? Yes, they came up with this idea as to how they can, cut down the cost of inputs. And that's them working for their members. Excellent. He went on to say, he added that the Small Business Association of Jamaica will continue to work with the government on policies and procedures that will benefit the sector. That are for him sector now, you know. So what I'm telling you, everybody out there looking out for them own. And nobody now look out for we. You notice that? He said, we have been trying to get them to have systems in place which are going to pump equity instead of loans into the new businesses and hope that we can get them to sponsor the types of businesses that are going to lead to rapid economic growth, Mr. James said. Who Mr. James are talking about? At the government of Jamaica? Is he saying, with the problem that the government had at the time, and with poor people supposed to suck up the burden of the taxation, right? Is he saying that he wanted government to put money into business as equity, meaning to say they're going as partners, you know, that they get shares in it, like what I suppose FinTech was doing. Pump money into them that way instead of giving the businesses loan. So we taxpayers must do that, you know. And the government must determine which industry is going to give them the quickest growth, right? That's an idea. But I don't know if the time was right for it. But that's him trying to look out for his members. You understand? No problem. We still wait to hear now who was looking out for us. So that was Mr. James' views. Next, we have the president of the Jamaica Export Association. Vitus Evans cited the need for exports to be incentivized, thereby exploring levels and categories of tax breaks that can be afforded, particularly in areas generating significant income. He also pointed to the need for increased production and productivity. Everybody look for a little relief from the government, you know. Right? All of them in agreement that the government should remove the tax exemptions on the GCT products that were exempted. Lower the GCT, significantly increase the threshold for personal income tax, and give them a blight, right? And the government was in serious financial problems, but they were all looking for them pound of flesh. And who did they expect to take up the tab for them getting their pop off? The consumers, the poor man. The poor man that the PNP would call, you hear them talk about poor people, and what you will hear the Labour Party call the consumers. Let me make it very simple for you and call it the consumers, because what I'm about to tell you now concerns the poor man, who are in the vast majority. They are the consumers in the vast majority. And this, I don't know what to call it. I don't know what to call it, seriously. Right? These imbeciles believe that somehow they could do well in business when their consumers are worse off. Bruce Golding went and tried best to bridge the gap, introduced indirect taxation, which turned out to be a direct taxation on the consumers who were living and working on $5,500 per week and less. You had people at that time living off $250 per week. That is what they call below the poverty line. There was a very high percentage of those people. And it's them, Mr. Matalon and people like Mark Golding. And I tell you, of all the members of the committee, the only one that concerns us now is Mark Golding. Ethel Norton Coke and Alison Peart and Lloyd Goodley, they have no significance to us at this point. But Mark Golding is. Little Joe Matalon is of no significance either. But Mark Golding is. Why? Because Mark Golding was on that committee that formulated this tax policy, according to them, that they were trying to force on the government because the government had its back against the wall. They went and implemented because they were told that this was going to make the economy grow massively. And what happened? There was a massive decline. Massive decline, 5.1%, and there was no hurricane or earthquake. Because they implemented policies to put tax on gas, which drive up the price of every damn thing. Remember now, you know. One of the funny things I heard about a notice with Mr. Matalon's proposal was when he asked for the, let me use the words, very significant increase in the threshold. Right? He wasn't happy with the 440,000. He wanted it to be significant, which means that people like him and Mark and the others would pay less taxes. But if the government give up tax that it don't have, it has to get it from somewhere else. Right? Not only did they want the threshold to have a significant increase, but they wanted to peg it to either inflation or the exchange rate. So if the exchange rate were to devalue by 15%, they wanted the threshold to go up by 15%. And they wanted this pegging because they knew that if one thing is certain, inflation is going to be on our backs, and so will the deterioration in the foreign exchange. So that will be a constant movement of the threshold, right? Reducing their requirement to pay tax as it increases, because that's what the threshold is. If you earn the threshold and below, you don't have to pay income tax. That's what that is about, right? Now, at no time did they suggest that those poor people that were earning $5,500 should have their minimum wage pegged to the inflation or pegged to the movement of the exchange rate. Did you notice that? Because the government, remember what Omar asked them to do, you know? Omar asked them to look at the various tax, right? And tell him what impact those taxes had on the economy. That him asked them to do, you know? And look which part they gone. Then God did not tell him saying to increase threshold. He never asked them to do that. He asked them what kind of impact the tax that may have in place now have on the economy. So since they were going off on a tangent, why did they not suggest that the people who are working on the minimum wage should have their minimum wages pegged to the inflation or to the movement of the foreign exchange? No, that is not the interest that they serve. They serve the interest of the people with capital. I wonder if you get me, my peeps. Mark Golding was on that committee, and Mark Golding would have signed off and agreed with those policy prescription. He is the one that we're concerned about now because him are the one to lead the opposition. And up to this day, we haven't heard what his opinion is about the taxation. You hear the Labour Party saying, no new tax for how much years. You hear Mark say anything? My recollection of the policy prescription of Matalon and the PSOJ was that they wanted the abolition of the income tax and corporate tax. And they wanted the government now to gain its money, all of its money, from consumption tax. And by consumption tax, what they were mainly referring to was GCT and fuel tax. Fuel tax because it affects everybody and everything, right? Not excise duty, not customs duty, because then that would prejudice the interest of their membership. I wonder if you understand me, my peeps. According to them, it's the most efficient and equitable way, because if you don't spend, then you don't pay tax. So they are saying the poor man going to spend, so him should pay him fair share of tax. The system that was in place at the time was that once you're earning below the threshold, you don't pay income tax. You pay the other taxes, but not income tax. Once you're earning below the threshold, right? There was a deliberate policy to think of the poor when you're implementing the GCT. Now, there are certain items that the poor consume, and those items that are mainly consumed by the poor, there was a tax exemption on them. Are you understand me, my peeps? Right? So they would not pay income tax. They also would not pay GCT on the goods that they buy. Right? And then 5,500 then can stretch. These evil and demonic people, yes, these abominations. Go to Bruce and tell Bruce and Audley that they must take off the exemption of those poor people goods and make the poor people start to pay. That's what they said. Make them start to pay. If them don't buy things, well, then them don't pay the tax. That's what I'm supposed to do, Dad. So them wanted the exemption, GCT exemption, to come out for those goods. No exemption at all. They also wanted the government to put the taxation that it needs on fuel, because according to them, that is even the most efficient way of collecting the tax. Knowing that when the price go on fuel, everything will go up. Again, who it is that faces the hardship? The man who has very little to spend. 50 to 60% of his money is going into food. My peeps, let me explain what food is. Food is a necessary thing to life. But food is not permanent. You put it in your body now, in another 4 or 5 hours you need to go eat again. It's almost like a waste. But then it's a good waste, because without it you can't live. They have very little to go buy. Fridge, like some people, stove, a nice divan bed, big TV, nice radio, and all them kind of something there. A fridge will last you about 10 years. A bed can last, because they make a wood can last you forever. you die and leave it, I can tell you. Right? A stove can last you a very long time. Microwave can last you a long. So when you spend your money on those items to give you some joy in life and comforts, those are expenditures that can last for years, and you can enjoy that expenditure. The poor man does not have that ability, right? He does not have the ability. So most of his money is going out to spend on something that is going to last him about 5 hours food. You understand now why he's poor? Materially, I mean poor. Because the money can't buy nothing else. You follow me? Maybe him can do a hairdo, maybe he can do something in finger and so on. Can't hardly save, because by the time you save and ready to buy something, inflation shoot up the price of the something again. I wonder if you understand me. So these are the people that these wicked and evil abominations wanted the government to put the tax on for them head. And the government obliged. To some degree, not to the full extent of which they wanted. So they wanted no income tax, no corporation tax. Them now will have the full benefit of all of the money that they earn. And all they would spend out of it is 10% in GCT. A totally different thing when a man earns $10 million and spend $1 million out of it in GCT, as opposed to him spending 1 million of it in GCT because of the items that he buys, plus 25% income tax, which is another 2.5 million. Him not have a generous soul. Not a generous soul at all. And him not have no consideration for poor people like you and I would. Those people who can't afford it. Right? And it's going to take a little while before them can step up in a life. That's all that is, There's many people who were poor managed to step up in a life, oftentimes through the children, oftentimes through opportunities, oftentimes through getting a job, increasing education and so on. And then you have some persons who had it and then fell into difficulties and became poor. So the government obliged, and what happened? Yes, gas price went up, food and everything went up on the poor people. They are the biggest consumer, because of the numbers of them. Even though they pay small, because of you have 83% of your people that live on minimum wage, and you gonna put burden on them. You know, so you must idiot. You know, so people like Joe Matalon is a clown. He's a dunce. He never thought. I suppose him reading the Torah, right? That in the last days the rich will be richer and the poor poorer. Well, that can only happen if the rich is producing in one country and exporting to another country where the people don't have the kind of idiot policies like they were proposing. But as long as you are producing to sell to your consumer, if your consumer becomes poorer, then you cannot be richer. It's damn illogical. And that is exactly what happened. The poor became poorer because the money that they held, the 5,500, could not buy what it used to buy. And so what happened to them? They ended up having to cut back. They're not going to starve. They're not going to starve. So then cut back. And when they cut back and don't buy the shoes they used to buy, every occasion they might buy one little shoes or might buy one little jeans pants. They make family send it from foreign. Or them do without. If them used to do them here 2 times a month for those workers now, because it's not only the poor it affected, it started to affect those were what you would call a low middle income people. Cost of living was going up and their income was not rising. So them cut back. And when that happened, a whole heap of the business them collapsed. Because there was nobody buying. And whole of them lose money. Even those who were in business that didn't collapse, they were making a loss. 5.1% decline in the economy. This policy of theirs was supposed to make the economy grow exponentially, and instead it was a major flop. Mark Goling was a part of that. And it is essential, now that he's leading the People's National Party, it's essential that we find out whether he still subscribes to the view that the income tax should be abolished, corporate tax should be abolished, GCT should be reduced to 10%, and whatever exemption might be left should be taken off. GCT should be placed on everything, all goods and all services, and the bulk then of the government revenue should come from GCT as well as fuel tax. We want to know if him still subscribe to that view. Therefore, we want to know if the people were dumb enough to go put him in a power, whether he intends to change the tax system from what it is now and reduce the tax that they pay as rich people and put the burden of the tax on those consumers at the bottom of the scale. What does that mean? It means you will be reducing the tax that some people pay, and to make up for the revenue lost to the government, you will be imposing taxes on items such as fuel. For argument's sake, for all we know, even the GCT, you have not opened your mouth and said what tax policies you are coming with. And we know where you stood back in 2009, right? Now we know why you can't say nothing about anything that you plan to come with, because you know it will not be accepted. Now we understand why Joe Matalon came out and endorsed you. You know, all come with a plan. You are the man who sat on that committee, you and Joe Matalon, and hatch a plot against the people of this country. To reduce paying taxes and then put it upon the poor people. Put it upon the poor people, make them pay it. And you and Bunting can capture the PMP. And little Joe Matalon back on endorse. Now we know what to know up to. Now we know what to know up to. Now we know why Bunting spent $650 million to try to overthrow Dr. Peter Phillips. Now we know why up to now we hear someone pay $1.6 billion to try to maintain on a little hole over the PMP. Now we know why we can't hear what the plans are. Now we know. Because on stand to gain. But I wonder, just like on miscalculated in the past, I wonder if you consider that you may not be miscalculating in the present. You need to go and study history. I tell you that, history is a very important thing, You don't know the people of this country. You need to go and study history. Mark Golding needs to come and tell us if he's still, and I hope these journalists, when they find him, or anyone of you buck him up anywhere, instead of boom off fist and that, yeah man, and all them goddamn rubbish. Ask the man the questions. Ask him the question. Were the people stupid enough to put him in Jamaica House? What will his tax policy be? Will he be abolishing income tax and corporate tax? Will he abolish GCT exemptions? Will he then put the GCT on all goods and services provided? And will it be his intention to use GCT and fuel taxes in order to generate revenue to run the economy? Ask him that. That is what we want to know. Right? And if him can't answer that, all I wanna run back and Mark it G, me G, next Prime Minister of Jamaica. I tell you, I don't have no special connections down in hell. But I sincerely hope that the devil is very busy. Him and them demons them down there preparing a especially hot spot for all I wanna come talk about Mark Golding going to be the next Prime Minister of Jamaica. I hope the devil down there with a specially hot spot. Stoke up the fire for no. For is like a demon from hell. You don't know nothing about this man. Nothing. Go and get that tax policy review committee's report that was sent to Omar Davis. That is who Mark Golding is. That's what he represents. That's what he's about. Trying to feather him on nest. Can't tell you about him not come to scrape. Poor Bruce. Could not see that what they were giving him was advice that was going to carry him down and carry down this country and make the people in the country suffer more. And then turn around and blame you. Or you them vote for Bruce? Or we the one them for blame, Matalon? Anyway, my peeps, that's it for me today. I hope I brought you some sterling information, And I hope you understand everything that I'm trying to tell you about this man, Mark Golding, and what he's really about. So anyway, thank you so much for joining me. Thank you for liking, sharing, subscribing, and leaving your comments in the comment section. Until next time, take good care of yourselves and walk good.